Okay, guys, it's Monday. Happy Easter to those who celebrate. I hope you guys have spent some nice days with people you love, doing things you love. And on that list, certainly Magic the Gathering for me. We have 40 new decks to look at from 5 sub-8s during this past week of Legacy Challenges. And as always, it never disappoints, let me put it that way. So I've tried a new format here, and let me know how you feel about it. Because now I'm trying to categorize into, let's call it archetypes or overarching strategies. I don't know. I think this makes a lot of sense when evaluating. I remember I learned this from way back when. I believe it was a Tom Ross, no, maybe Ariel Lax article where in Modern, sure, Modern had, I don't know, 15 different decks, but you could sort them into, I don't know, 5 categories maybe. So whether people played Amulet or Tron, that was like big mana, you know, Scapeshift strategies in there as well. If people played Jund, people played Abzan, didn't really matter. That was like mid-range. If people played Burn or Infect or some Collected Company deck, didn't really matter. It was creature, quote-unquote, combo, because you needed spud removal. You needed a lot of the same things against those decks, right? So this is a good way to understand the format from the categories. So let's see if that works. The first category, and by far the most popular one this past week, was Daze decks. So why is it useful to classify them Daze decks instead of going into, you know, Grixis, Dimir, Izzet, Temur, and Dreadnought variants? Well, that is important because you're going to be facing the same disruption when facing the deck. You're facing Daze, Force of Will, Wasteland, and they put up some kind of a clock, right? When you play Daze, you're not playing a deck that wins on turn 20. You're playing a deck that can win on turn, I don't know, 5 or 6. So that's why it's useful. With that being said, the most popular version this week was Grixis, which, if some people remember, I often talked about in the old metagame of you play blue-black, solid mana-based, you play Esper, and you have the great removal spells available to you. This is the same thing. You play the blue-black shell, but you add Molten Collapse in your 75, and you add Pyroblast, and I think most versions also will have Meltdown, a card we can maybe discuss a little bit later and see if that card still makes sense. By having Molten Collapse and Pyroblast in your deck, you're not as weak to Murktide Regent, you're not as weak to Chalice of the Void. You can play against random decks that's going to play, I don't know, a Narset, a Karn, random permanents. You just have that covered because of Molten Collapse. Also, by playing red, you get better against Show and Tell, Stock Up, that kind of thing. So with the meta being very blue, I love this. The concession to the mana is, of course, meaningful. So in theory, decks that capitalize on that, spoiler alert, lands and stuff like that, Blood Moon will have a good time. So it's always a trade-off when you're choosing to run a third color and add better spells. I mean, everybody would be playing 3 or 4 color decks if it was free, but because it's Legacy and we play, you know, in a format with mainly Wasteland and Blood Moon, but also stuff like Price of Progress, Back to Basics, some niche playables, it comes with a cost. So that deck has done incredibly well, and I'm excited to see how the metagame reacts to that exactly. Up next is the deck we have featured for many weeks, straight blue-black, consistency in the mana base. We have our Nethergoyfs to beat down with. We have our Murktide Regents to finish off players. We have our Grind Elements in Tamio and Kaito. That deck is still doing great. So functionally the same deck, just less consistency on the mana and less powerful cards. So Grixis with less consistency on the mana, and blue-black, straight blue-black with less powerful cards. So definitely a cool strategy, and it's here to stay. Core Steel Cutter here. Okay, so last week I uploaded a video featuring this card in a blue-red tempo deck. So one of these is actually a straight-up copy of that deck. So yeah, always pretty cool to see people copy my work and do well. That's, you know, the next best thing. This card is quite cool because it allows your tempo deck to beat spud removal, which is kind of a problem sometimes. You know, you get plowed, you get, what do I know, bolted or pushed, and then you just sit there and the mid-range deck can kind of take over. This card is a bit different. It has to get killed by Prismatic Ending, or it will kind of take over the game, reward every cantrip, every exchange, even make a card like Daze better in the later stages. Let's say you can, I don't know, get Petty Theft on the opponent's end step, daze it, and pay for it. You get a Monk, right? Because you play 2 spells on that turn. Pretty excited to see if this is here to stay. It's kind of like a young Pyromancer, more resilient version of that. So it's not killing anybody super quickly on average, but it can. So it's mainly played for its resilience. And that resilience can obviously go down if people start playing more, let's say, Abrupt Decay, Witherbloom Command, Prismatic Ending, Besejus. There's a bunch of incidental disenchant effects that makes this card unexciting. So let's keep an eye out for that one. Then we have a couple of teamer versions. The classic one, the Questing Druids. I'm not too big on that these days. I feel like there are better grindy elements. I like Tameo better. I like Stock Up better. I like playing an additional color better. I like playing blue-black better. So for now, the teamer version for me is shelved, but can for sure come back in the future. To round out today's decks, we have a sweet Dreadnought deck. Correction Dreadnought is always played in the hands of people who really just love that strategy. I think it's awesome as well. But I think with Eldrazi fading out of the metagame, that was kind of my reason to play it, right? I could mate it for consigns and have good game against the top of the field. Since that's not the case anymore, I'm not too big on Dreadnought, but I love to see people fighting the good fight. The next pile here is going to be Control, or heavy mid-range, at least decks that think it's viable to resolve 3-mana spells before being dead. Players who think it's nice, good enough to play a 2-mana enchantment that cantrips that doesn't impact the board. So this is a sign of the format slowing down significantly, that these players can do well, and Control is not a bad choice. So first up, we have Grixis here. Obviously, Mr. Grixis. James, forgot the last name. He makes content as well. Go check it out if you're in for some Grixis. I think this was a 4 or 5 color up the Beanstalk control list, like classic with the 4th Eolingus as a finisher. You have your Leyline Binding, stuff like that. Brings me back to the sweet, sweet memories from a year ago where I qualified for the mocks with such a deck. Then we have what I always call like basic land control. And when you see this card in the list, you know it's certainly basic land control. So pretty cool Jeskai deck. Yeah, love to see it. Then we have a big drop off from, oh, by the way, this artwork is so amazing. That looks amazing. I actually didn't notice this before. We have a big drop off here from the Bug Beanstalk deck, which was, you know, something players really wanted to play. When this card got spoiled, you have your, let's call it a divination for the lack of a better word. It's like your stock up, but it triggers Beanstalk, pitches to everything you might want to play between endurance and forces. And now it's like a role player in the metagame, which is totally fine. I would love to try and build this deck at some point and work a little bit out on it, because it's a solid way, in my opinion, to go slightly over the top of these beefy Daze decks here. So let's keep an eye out for that one. Then we had 2 copies of Wizards. I believe both were of the Jeskai variety, so you still have the white removal spells. You have your Thunder the Trap Trainers, your Tameos, your Snapcasters, and I believe even some Magus of the Moon, which is not just a human, it's a human wizard. So pretty interested about this. So if people are playing a card like this, they have main deck artifact removal, which already is something that makes the cutter worse, right? So I'm looking for all of this stuff when I'm analyzing positioning of different threats. That does it for the, let's say, primarily blue decks here. So note that this huge chunk of Daze decks probably enabled this semi-chunk of, you know, bigger blue decks to do well. So yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye out on this dynamic, because there's also another metagame to beat, obviously, and this is what we get into now. So the next pile is going to be Ancient Tomb decks. We have a couple of blue ones here. Mono Blue Painter was, you know, all the rage at some point. Now it's a niche deck, which is probably a good place for it to be. So I'm still excited about that deck, and I think it's just good to remember that when you like a deck, you don't want it to be a 12% deck of the metagame. You want it to be a 1% deck and people going, I don't need my Null Rods today, right? So great development if you like this deck like I do. This deck, I believe, was a Hullbreacher Narset Wheels deck, a deck that has been fringe playable for a couple of years. It's also a Karn deck. It's fun. A lot of stuff going on in that deck. Reminds me of some of the Killer Bee piles. So definitely give that a look if you like heavy action. Single copy of Red Painter. I'm actually surprised there's only a single. So let's say you woke me up in the middle of the night and told me, oh, we're going to have 20 blue decks on top of the field. What else do you think did well? And I would be, okay, this top 8 times 5 probably had 3 or 4 red painters. That would be my gut instinct, right? But only a single here. I actually think it's very well positioned, mainly due to Pyroblast and having just a functional deck in general. The Blood Moons here are pretty amazing into a lot of this field, I guess, except these decks down here. It's good against the greedy mana here. You can strand some cards in the opponent's hand. It's good against these decks. I guess maybe not. Maybe these decks play too many basics and it just, didn't find enough, lands opponents, other saga decks to prey on. But I mean, 3 out of 40 is still solid. So Blood Moon still putting up work, and you have to respect it in your deck building. This next pile is Graveyard, and I want to start off with the usual suspects here. Oops and Fast Reanimator. Having 10% of these top 8s has been somewhat stable. We've obviously we've had way higher with the Spy, seeing many copies on this list. But I think this is reasonable. And again, ideally, you want to be the only Oops player in the world, so people don't, mulligan for it, sideboard for it, and generally are not ready for the whole shenanigans revolving how do you play your Graveyard Hate, etc. Speaking of that, if you want to learn more about that, this week I uploaded a guest guide from Faulted Form, the #1 Oops player on my Metafy. So I've had very good feedback about that one. People learned a lot, and Faulted Form was kind enough to donate it. So yeah, make sure to thank him if you ever run into him in on Magic Online. I guess he will kill you on turn 1, and then, but still be nice because he donated a guide, and I'm very happy for that. Yeah, a couple of Fast Reanimator. That's actually going to be the guest content coming up this week. We have Rootsley and Psy, 2 regulars in the Legacy queues. I believe Psy won the trophy race last season, and Rootsley has, slayed me on multiple occasions, no pun intended. Yeah, definitely check that out as well. I know they put a lot of work into it. Couple of Breakfast here. Breakfast, it's been a while since we don't really see that regularly. Then it wins the showcase, pops up, then it goes back down. But 2 copies here, solid. It's a deck that has a lot of play to it. People don't know if you're killing them on turn 2 or you're grinding them out with, Sagas, Teferi, Nadu. So that deck is definitely something that you want to master as well. And funnily enough, that was my first guest content. I've only had 2 pieces of guest content with 1 incoming with the Reanimator, and Turn Weekend Champ Larson was the first one to contribute to my Metafy, and that was a primer. These are going to be guides. The Breakfast was just a huge primer. I thought, I'll read this before bedtime. I got to bed very late that night. That was what a Bible of breakfast shenanigans from Larson, the Eternal Weekend Champ. And now this is actually what I'm most excited about. So I didn't realize these had. I plugged my my content here 3 times in this pile. But Blue Black Reanimator took down a challenge not many hours from not many hours before this recording. And I've been brainstorming back and forth with a friend about how to move forward with this. Entomb Reanimate Atraxa is still amazing, so how can we build a functional deck around it? So I'm going to keep my eye out on this development because I want to produce a turn 2 Atraxa in my Force of Will deck. Next pile is Assorted Combo, so I don't even have to say who did well with this. Obviously, JPA, a master of his craft when it comes to sneak attack, did well as the only show and tell deck here, so again, this is awesome for him. He want to be the only player in the world, so he doesn't run into stupid stuff. So pretty nice. We have Doomsday, another deck specialist finish. And the Predominance, another combo enjoyer, I believe it was Tony Scapone. I think I played against him, maybe not that tournament, but another anyway. He killed himself in turn 1. So if he came back and won 5 straight to top 8, hats off. Those combo decks are always good fun, especially Doomsday being very, very challenging. Second to last column here is going to be lands. I thought of this as a big mana pile. Let's say there are some Cloud Post or whatever in here. I would put it here. So lands is mainly good when you don't get comboed out by different combo decks. So it's very hard to build a functional sideboard. It's very hard to mulligan. And it's good when Recurable Wasteland is good. So it looks like these lands players got some good mileage out of playing against some, I don't know, greedy Beanstalks, greedy Grixis, and maybe their hate cards like Endurances and Chokes hit hard. It looks like Choke is amazing against this metagame. So, but again, the 2 players who did well, Sprouts and Ali, look, they could probably do well into any field with lands. So I don't want to, overreact to it. I think that's actually something I should think about more in the future is if JPA won with Sneak Attack, if Silent Goat won with Blood Moon, if Chutin or Vaulted Form won with Oops, like not put too much stock into those doing well because that's kind of a given at these days. The last column here is going to be creatures. Death and Taxes, Yoshiwara, holding the flag high when it comes to Death and Taxes. Obviously, a great deck against all of these decks over here. Historically, when I played this deck at the local game store, GP level, I wanted to play against the blue decks. That's just great because their counter magic aren't very good, and we can kind of outgrind them. We have enough tools to prolong the game, and then we can take over with some engine cards, card advantage cards, shenanigans. So yeah, I like that as well. Again, that card shines versus Assorted Fair, and it doesn't shine against Assorted Unfair. So I've often talked about in this series where yeah, sure, it's good if you only have to handle Fair in the graveyard. We can do that, right? But if we have to handle Sneak, Doomsday, other ritual decks, it's going to be rough. To round out the list, we have the Cradle Control deck. This is another deck that will happily play against these blue decks. Nobody's playing Sweepers. Why would they? This is the only deck Sweepers would be good against. So this deck is having a field day as long as it doesn't lose to random combo decks. I believe the deck is playing 4 Thoughtseize these days in order to have game against as much stuff as possible. Yeah, that does it for the 40 decks. So let's quickly talk about some cards and their positioning before wrapping up the video. So I just want to mention that Daze has gotten better. So ironically, it's not that great in these mirror matches, but if enough people are playing, Stock Up, Bargain, Kolaghan's Command, Blood Moon, Sneak Attack, Doomsday, then all of a sudden, Daze is a lot better than it was just a few weeks ago. Hydroblast is a card I keep looking at how effective it is. And I think with the rise of Wizards, Grixis, and Is It Combined is good, because that's a lot of incidental stuff you can Red Blast. And then Sneak Attack, Blood Moon, Painter being like, that was used to be the main reasons for the card, but now we can actually justify it because we see a lot of red across the metagame. Pyroblast, that's going to be very simple. I don't know how much of these decks are blue, but it's definitely approaching 70%, so obviously the card is amazing. The last card I want to talk about is Consigned Memory. With Eldrazi nowhere to be seen, the card, sure, you want it against lands, you want it against Cradle Control, you want it against Prison, you want it against Dreadnought, but it's not really worth it these days, and maybe that will find some, some decks will find potential in that, and try and exploit that exact fact that people aren't playing any, or should not be playing any Consigned Memory, I guess. I guess it's still viable to play a single copy in some decks, but certainly not the best positioning for the card. Okay, that's gonna do it for today's Metagame Monday. We got to uncover a lot of stuff. I hope you like my, organizing of these, my analysis, and as always, let me know what you guys get out of these videos. Sometimes I get some nice messages like, oh, I used your logic to build a deck and go and crush the local metagame, and you nailed it, and you know, stuff like that. Share it. I'll be very, very happy about hearing such things. And I guess, yeah, until next time, have fun playing Legacy, and I'll see you back soon.